My son called. "Dad, I'm at the police station. My stepdad attacked me and filed a false report." The words hit me like a physical blow, silencing the usual background hum of the major crimes unit. I gripped the receiver, my knuckles white against the black plastic. I took a steadying breath, the kind that anchors you when the world tilts on its axis. I was not Captain Liam Kane of the Metro PD in that moment, just a father whose entire universe had narrowed down to the panic tremor in his 16-year-old son's voice. I asked him which officer had booked him in. "Sergeant Williams," he whispered. I said, "Sit tight, 20 minutes. I didn't call a lawyer. I didn't call my commander. I walked to the locker room, opened my reinforced steel locker, and pulled out my Class A uniform shirt. I put on the polished brass, the crisp blue fabric, and the leather duty belt that contained the entirety of my professional life. When I showed up at the front desk of the 3rd Precinct, 20 minutes later, the desk sergeant, a veteran named Miller, blinked once, then froze. The sight of the captain in full dress uniform at the intake desk for a routine juvenile incident was like seeing the chief of police show up to direct traffic. I walked straight past him and toward the interview rooms. Sergeant Williams, a good cop but known for his strict adherence to procedure, was filling out a preliminary report. He looked up, his professional demeanor instantly shattering. "Captain," he asked, confusion and shock plain on his face. My world didn't just stop when I heard what my ex-wife's husband had done. It shattered and then rebuilt itself around one single, furious truth: you don't touch what's mine. My arrival at the precinct in uniform was my first declaration of war. It was a calculated, deliberate act of professional intimidation, a signal that this was not a matter to be handled by some overworked public defender. This was going to be handled by Captain Kane, and the rules of engagement had just been rewritten. The initial, immediate threat to Tyler, the possibility of being processed and charged, was neutralized the moment the captain's stripes walked through that door. I looked at Sergeant Williams, my expression conveying volumes. "I'm relieving you of this immediate duty, Sergeant. I'll take it from here." Williams nodded immediately, gathering his paperwork. "Yes, Captain. Victor Harrison is in room 3. He filed an assault complaint against Tyler Kane at approximately 2:05 in the afternoon. He's claiming self-defense and injuries to his ribs." "I know," I said, my voice low and grating. "I know exactly what he claimed. I knew Victor was smart, a quality that only amplified his danger. He was already playing the victim, preemptively using my own system against my son. But I was the one who built the system, and I knew every single flaw, every loophole, and every pressure point. This was my fight now, and I was going to use every piece of knowledge and every stripe I had earned over 23 years on the force and 3 tours in Afghanistan to win it. I would not let protocol, bureaucracy, or a slick-talking manipulator stand between me and my son. That was a line I would gladly cross. My uniform was no longer a shield of the law, it was the skin of a wolf guarding its cub. The captain was here, and 20 minutes was all it took. The professional shield I'd worn to the precinct was the first move in this personal war. Now, leaning against the cold cinder block wall of the station hallway, waiting for Detective Stevens to arrive, I had to explain why I knew Victor Harrison was rotten to the core. This knowledge wasn't professional judgment. It was instinct honed by 23 years of seeing the shadows of the city. To understand the fury that drove me, you have to understand the failure that preceded it. Sarah and I had split when Tyler was 12. The divorce had been inevitable. She wanted stability, a man who came home at 6 in the evening. I was a man who answered 3 a.m. calls about officer-involved shootings, a man who had seen too much darkness to offer the kind of gentle, predictable life she craved. Our split was clean, amicable, focusing only on Tyler's well-being. For 2 years, things were fine. Tyler was adjusting, spending weekends with me, immersed in the oil and metal of my brother Ryan's garage. Then came Victor Harrison. He met Sarah at some kind of charity gala. Victor was the picture of success at a contractor. Harrison development, fast money, an expensive car, and a smile that seemed engineered for maximum charisma. He knew all the right things to say to a single mother looking for security. 6 months of dating. 6 months of engagement. I saw him once at Tyler's middle school parent night, and my professional radar, the thing that had kept me alive in Kandahar and alive on the streets, started screaming. He was too perfect. The guys who are too charming, too successful without any visible hustle. The ones whose surfaces never ripple. They're usually hiding a cavern underneath. I had arrested enough con artists and manipulators to recognize the type. They operate by maintaining an immaculate facade while controlling every situation behind closed doors. I ran the background check. It's what cops do. It was clean, spotless. No arrests, no restraining orders, not even a traffic fine. On paper, he was everything Sarah had wanted. Financially successful, well regarded in the community. But I'd learned the hard way that paper lies. I told Sarah I had reservations, that my gut was turning over. She accused me of being jealous, of being unable to accept she'd moved on. Maybe a small part of her was right, but mostly, the cop in me was screaming. She married him anyway. She didn't listen. They got married anyway. A small ceremony I wasn't invited to. That should have been my first real warning. The changes in Tyler started gradually after Victor moved in. He grew quiet. During our weekend visits, he'd hunch over his phone or a car engine, refusing to meet my eyes. When I asked about home, he'd use that flat, toneless word kids use when they're protecting a secret fine. I'd probe gently, trying to use the techniques I used on reluctant witnesses, but he'd clam up every time. Sarah insisted I was being paranoid, that Victor was wonderful with Tyler, that they were bonding. "Give it time," she said. "These things take time." But time didn't fix it. It made it fester. I carried the guilt of that time like a lead weight. My life had been too big, too dangerous, leaving her to find a different kind of safety. And now I realized the distance I had created, the absence that led to our divorce, had left a vacuum for a predator to fill. I had failed to be the husband she needed, and in doing so, I had inadvertently exposed my son to this danger. Every time Tyler had said fine, every time I'd accepted Sarah's easy dismissal, I felt a stab of guilt, a knowledge that I wasn't being paranoid enough. The decorated officer had been played by his own conflicting emotions. Now, the mask was off, and the reality of the fresh bruise on Tyler's face made my past failures crystal clear. I wouldn't let him hide the truth anymore. I wouldn't let Victor hide behind his perfect paper trail. The captain was done playing games. The father was ready to act. That Tuesday afternoon, the low hum of the precinct was shattered by the ring of my private phone, pulling me out of the retrospective nightmare of the past and into the immediate, visceral reality of the present. I saw the screen and the name Tyler flash, and the professional distance I'd maintained for 23 years evaporated. "Hey, champ, you okay?" I asked, trying to keep the strain from my voice. "Yeah, I'm fine, Dad. Just, can we talk?" Not on the phone. His voice was too low, too constrained. Tyler was 16, a high school sophomore, and usually communicated in grunts and emojis. This controlled tension, this request for a physical, private meeting, triggered the survival instinct that had kept me alive in Helmand Province. "I can pick you up in 20. Your spot." "No," he said, the sound barely audible. "Can you meet me at Uncle Ryan's garage instead?" "I don't want to be home right now." Ryan's garage, that industrial sanctuary of motor oil and old metal, was where Tyler went to hide. I grabbed my jacket and told my lieutenant I'd be gone for an hour, ignoring the question in his eyes. He knew better than to push when my expression shifted to that particular brand of cold focus. When I pulled up to the garage, the air smelled like rust and burnt fuel, and Ryan was under a lift working on a Chevelle. I found Tyler sitting on the hood of another project car, his shoulders hunched, his head down. I'd seen that posture 1,000 times on teenagers, but this was different. This wasn't typical teenage brooding. This was fear. "Tyler." He looked up, and that's when I saw it. A purple shadow blooming under his left eye, half hidden by carefully arranged dark hair. The bruise was fresh, that particular color that appears only in the first few hours before the deep purple sets in. My training kicked in instantly, replacing the parental panic with the meticulous, methodical calm of an investigator. 23 years on the force, hundreds of domestic violence calls, and suddenly I was looking at a crime scene on the face of my own son. "Don't freak out," Tyler said quickly, sliding off the car, raising his hands defensively. "It's not as bad as it looks." Those exact words. I had heard those exact words from countless victims trying to protect their abusers or minimize the violence. It was a reflex of abuse. I approached slowly, using the calm, non-threatening voice I reserve for witnesses in high-stress situations. "Let me see." I gently turned his face toward the light filtering in through the high windows. The bruise was textbook. Then I moved to his arm, carefully pulling up the sleeve of his dark shirt. There they were, 4 distinct pressure points, a faint, barely visible indentation on his upper arm. Thumbprint on one side, 4 fingers on the other. A classic grab and hold pattern. The kind of mark left when an adult with full strength grips a teenager hard enough to leave an impression. "Tyler, who did this to you?" My voice was level, professional, and entirely devoid of the roaring fury that was consuming me internally. His eyes filled instantly, but he was 16, a linebacker, and too proud to shed tears. He tried to speak, and his voice cracked slightly. "We got in an argument about football. Victor wanted me to quit. I told him he should actually show up to a game before making decisions about my life. He didn't like that." Tyler detailed the incident, the grab, the shove against the hallway wall, Victor's face turning red, the veins popping in his neck. He said I was disrespectful, that mom lets me get away with murder because she's too soft, and that since my father was too busy playing cop to actually parent. It fell to him. I felt a cold certainty settle in my blood. Playing cop. Those were Victor's words used to belittle me and exert control over Tyler. "What happened next?" I prompted, keeping my voice low. He kept me pinned there for maybe 30 seconds, just staring. Then he said I needed to learn my place in his house. I pushed him back, just once, to create space so I could breathe. He stumbled, caught himself, and then he really lost it. "He punched me here." Tyler touched his eye gently, wincing. He kept saying I disrespected him in his own home. He used the word insubordination. Insubordination, a military term. A word of command and control, revealing the authoritarian personality I'd suspected all along. This wasn't a sudden loss of temper. This was an eruption of dominance. I pulled my son into my arms then. I didn't care about the combat calm. I felt him shake against my chest. Did you hit him back? No, I left, grabbed my bike and came here. He pulled away, wiping his face quickly. I shouldn't have provoked him, Dad. I know Mom's happy with him, and I don't want to mess that up. Stop. I gripped his shoulders, making sure his bruised eye met mine. You did nothing wrong. A grown man put his hands on you. That's assault. That's unacceptable. I'll handle your mother right now. I need you to do exactly what I say. We're going to the hospital, getting you checked out, and then we're documenting everything. Tyler nodded, and in his eyes I saw that deep, absolute faith that his father would fix this. It was a weight of responsibility heavier than any badge, but one I would carry until my last breath. Victor Harrison had made the biggest mistake of his life, because he had crossed the line that superseded all codes and all laws. He had touched my son. The sterile light of the hospital exam room confirmed the evidence, but the true battleground was about to shift from a medical exam room to the very precinct I commanded. Dr. Patricia Wong was meticulous, photographing the contusions on Tyler's face and arms from multiple angles. The clinical description of the damage, bruising consistent with manual force and defensive marks on his forearms, was sickening, yet it was the bedrock of the case I needed to build. The bruising pattern is consistent with manual strangulation attempt around the upper arms and force applied to the facial area. Dr. Wong said quietly, I'm required to report this to Child Protective Services. I'm already filing a police report. I said, my arms crossed against the cold wall. I'm a police captain. This is my son. Do what you need to do. I hated that phrase. Protocol is protocol. But I needed everything by the book if I was going to beat Victor. Sarah arrived 20 minutes later with her sister Lauren. She burst through the door, her face a mask of panic, rushing toward Tyler. Tyler! Oh my God, what happened? I cut straight to the point. Victor did this. Sarah froze, the panic turning instantly to denial. What? No, there must be a misunderstanding. No misunderstanding, Mom? Tyler said quietly from the edge of the bed. He grabbed me, shoved me into the wall, then punched me when I pushed him back. Sarah's face crumpled, the beautiful facade of her new life cracking. But Victor wouldn't. He did, Sarah. I insisted. And I'm filing charges. Assault on a minor. Domestic violence. Potentially more depending on what CPS finds. She turned on me, eyes wild, protective of the life she'd built. You can't. This will destroy him, his business, his reputation. He should have thought of that before he put his hands on our son. I shot back, the control slipping for a moment. Lauren stepped in, placing a calming hand on Sarah's arm. Jess, look at Tyler's face. Look at what he did. Sarah seemed to deflate, sinking into a nearby chair. I didn't know. I didn't see this coming. He's been stressed. But I thought. You thought what? My voice was harder than I intended. That it was okay for him to take his stress out on Tyler. That the boy should just toughen up and deal with it. She looked up, mascara running. No, of course not. I thought I was protecting Tyler by giving him a stable home, by giving him a father figure who would actually be around. The sting of that ancient accusation was still potent, but I couldn't take the bait. The moment demanded the captain's focus, not the ex-husband's bitterness. Tyler already has a father. What he needed was for his mother to protect him from an abusive stepfather. The silence in that room was crushing, filled with Sarah's quiet sobs and Tyler's withdrawn stillness. Then my phone rang. The precinct. Captain, we've got a situation. Officer Jordan Foster said when I answered. Victor Harrison just showed up at the station claiming Tyler attacked him. He's got some bruising on his ribs, and he's demanding to file charges. He's also claiming you threatened him. Of course, he did. Victor wasn't just an abuser, he was a strategic narcissist. His move was smart, get ahead of the narrative. Play the victim, muddy the waters with a counterclaim. The classic abuser playbook. Keep him there, I ordered. I'm on my way. I looked at Sarah, the decision in my eyes non-negotiable. Your husband just showed up at my precinct, trying to file charges against Tyler for assault. You need to decide right now whose side you're on, because this is about to get ugly. Sarah could only look from Tyler's bruised face to the evidence of what her husband had done. I need to talk to Victor. There has to be an explanation. There is no explanation that makes this okay, I said. But you do what you need to do. Tyler's coming with me. When we arrived at the precinct, Victor was already in interview room 3, giving an Oscar-worthy performance of the injured party. Through the one-way glass, I could see him, carefully disheveled, holding his ribs, his face arranged in a mask of righteous indignation. He looked respectable, the victim. Jordan updated me. He claims Tyler attacked him unprovoked this morning. Says the kid has anger management issues. That he's verbally abusive. He's demanding charges for assault and battery. Did he mention the part where he's the one who assaulted a minor? He says Tyler attacked him first, and he was defending himself. Claims any injuries Tyler has are from Tyler falling during the altercation, or from Tyler hitting himself to make Victor look bad. I'd seen it 1,000 times: reverse victim and offender. Victor was smart enough to show up immediately to control the narrative. "Where's Frank?" I asked, referring to my lieutenant, already in there taking his statement. Jordan's face showed concern. "Captain, you know you can't be involved in this investigation. Any defense attorney worth their salt will claim bias." She was right, and I hated it. Protocol demanded someone else handle it. Who's handling it? Lieutenant Mitchell assigned it to Detective Karen Stevens. She's on her way in now. Karen Stevens, 15 years in special victims, specializing in child abuse. She was tough, thorough, and wouldn't buy Victor's performance for a second. If anyone could nail this case down tight, it was Karen. Good. I want everything by the book. Every procedure followed exactly. This case needs to be airtight. I looked at Tyler, who stood silently beside me. "Champ, Detective Stevens is going to interview you. Tell her everything exactly as it happened. Just the truth."
"Can you do that?"
"What about Victor?" "Let me worry about Victor." I was finally letting go of the control I needed to maintain as captain, trusting the system to function, while simultaneously using my knowledge of that system to ensure Victor had nowhere left to run. My fury was no longer blinding. It was fueling the methodical, calculated war machine I was about to unleash. With Victor arrested, the storm seemed to pass, but I knew men like him didn't accept defeat. They plotted revenge. Victor Harrison was released the next morning. His business partner posted $50,000 in bail within an hour of the arraignment. The speed was a testament to his financial reach and the kind of loyalty, or perhaps fear, he commanded. The judge, thankfully, had not been entirely swayed by Victor's suit and performance. She added strict conditions: no contact with Tyler, no contact with me, and a mandatory GPS monitoring ankle bracelet. He was ordered to stay away from Sarah's residence. These were the chains of the law, a cage built of paperwork, but I knew they wouldn't hold a man whose greatest fear was losing control. As soon as he was released, Victor started building his narrative. Officer Jordan Foster showed me his social media page 20 minutes after he walked out of booking. It was a perfectly crafted victim statement, being falsely accused of child abuse by a vindictive ex-husband who can't accept that his family has moved on. The truth will come out. Justice will prevail. He used hashtags like false accusations and father's rights. The post already had dozens of shares and hundreds of comments, half supporting him, half questioning his character. He's playing the victim publicly. Jordan said, frustrated. "Let him," I replied, handing back the phone. "Every public statement he makes is potential evidence. He's digging his own grave." But my concern was deeper than his public image. Men like Victor don't just accept humiliation quietly, they retaliate. The legal cage was set, but it was porous. I didn't trust the conditions to keep Tyler safe. I had to create a fortress built of my own vigilance. I called my brother Ryan, whose garage was the only place Tyler felt safe. "How's Tyler?" "Quiet. Keeps asking if Victor's going to come after him. Tell him Victor's under GPS monitoring and has a restraining order. But I need you to do something else. I need you to take him somewhere Victor doesn't know about. The cabin upstate. Go now." Ryan didn't argue. "You think he's going to track us?" "I think he's going to realize his victim card isn't working and get desperate," I said. "And desperate men do stupid things. Don't tell me exactly where. Just go. Pay cash for everything. No social media check-ins." I didn't tell my brother that I was half hoping Victor would come after me. Because if he violated the restraining order, if he made any threats, if he did anything stupid, I'd have even more ammunition to ensure he went away for a very long time. It was a calculated risk. A cold calculation that allowed me to channel my overwhelming parental fury into a viable legal strategy. I was using myself as bait, hoping Victor's need for control would overpower his common sense. Detective Stevens was building the formal case against him, ensuring every detail was perfect. She had interviewed Sarah at length, finally getting her to acknowledge the history of Victor's hidden temper and verbal cruelty. Sarah was still wrestling with denial, but the evidence, Tyler's injuries, the police report, the CPS investigation, was pushing her toward reality. His lawyer, James Porter, is already trying to suppress the medical evidence, claiming Tyler's injuries were from a sports incident that morning. Stevens reported. "Porter's good. He specializes in the indefensible," I acknowledged. "But we have the doctor's timeline, and we have the finger marks. They don't lie. Make sure the chain of custody for all evidence is ironclad. We cannot afford one procedural mistake." I spent the next 3 days living on a knife's edge, working 18-hour days, running my precinct, but listening with 90% of my attention to my private phone, waiting. My office felt like a pressurized cage. I was the captain, yet I couldn't protect my son from 400 miles away except by trusting my brother and trusting the thin blue line of GPS coordinates. I kept picturing Victor, handsome and entitled, sitting in his expensive house, his ankle bracelet blinking, seething with the humiliation of being told a no by the law. His professional reputation, his public face, was crumbling. That level of exposure to a narcissist was the ultimate trigger. He needed to reclaim authority, and the easiest target was the one who had defied him, Tyler. I checked the status of the CPS investigation every few hours, making sure my contact, Patricia Mendes, understood the extreme risk. He's unpredictable now, Patricia. He feels cornered. We've issued an emergency no-contact order for Tyler's protection, Captain. Sarah is cooperating fully with our investigation into the home environment. She's staying with her sister. Cooperation. It was a start. Sarah was finally prioritizing Tyler over her compromised dream of stability. But the anxiety was a constant, low-frequency tremor in my chest. Every minute felt like an hour. Every unknown car on the street outside my window seemed like a possible threat. I was the most powerful man in the city when it came to fighting crime. But when it came to protecting my son from a wealthy, vengeful man, I felt utterly, terrifyingly vulnerable. I was the father who had failed to be present, and was now trying to exert absolute control from a distance. The only way to truly secure Tyler's safety was for Victor to break the law in a way that would guarantee a massive sentence. I was waiting for Victor to get desperate. I was waiting for him to make a second, fatal mistake. The tension was almost unbearable. I wished he would stop playing the victim and just make his move. I wished the wait would end. It was the only way I could finally stop being the anxious father and go back to being the calculating captain who knew how to end a conflict permanently. The 2 hours I spent driving that night were the longest of my life, a blur of rage and calculation, knowing Victor had finally thrown off the chains of the law. I'd been living on a razor's edge for 72 hours, waiting for Victor to be stupid, waiting for him to get desperate enough to make his move. The call came at 2:47 in the morning, shattering the tense silence of my apartment. It was Tyler. His voice was panicked and breathless. "Dad, Victor found us. He's at the cabin. Ryan called the police, but he's trying to break in. Put Ryan on," I ordered, my mind instantly snapping into the focused coldness of combat. My brother's voice was strained, urgent. "Liam, he's got a crowbar. He's trying to get through the back door. Police are 15 minutes out. Barricade yourselves in the bedroom. Put the heaviest dresser against the door. Do not engage with him. I'm on my way." I didn't waste a second. I was already moving, grabbing my service weapon from the safe, strapping my jacket over my shoulder rig, grabbing keys and phone. The cabin was 2 hours away. Local police were 15 minutes out. The math said they'd handle it before I arrived, but I wasn't taking chances. Victor had crossed the final boundary, and I was going to be there when the consequences dropped. I called Frank Mitchell, my lieutenant. "Victor Harrison just violated his restraining order and GPS monitoring. He's at my brother's cabin trying to break in with Tyler inside. Units are en route, but I'm going." "Captain, you can't." Frank started, knowing the procedural violation of involving myself in an ongoing incident involving family. "I'm going, Frank. Have someone pull Harrison's GPS data for the past 72 hours. I want to know how long he's been planning this. I want every single coordinate." The drive was a relentless, high-speed blur of back roads and flashing lights. I pushed my unmarked cruiser to its limit, the cold night air rushing past the windows. My internal monologue was a tactical nightmare. How had Victor found them? Ryan had been careful, paying cash, using obscure routes. Victor must have placed surveillance on Ryan or somehow tracked him to the general area, relying on his wealth and contacts. The fear for Tyler was a tight, painful knot in my stomach, overriding the professionalism I usually prized. All that mattered was getting there. By the time I arrived, 3 patrol cars were already on the scene, their blue and red lights flashing against the dark pines and the snow-dusted ground. Victor was on the ground, handcuffed, shouting incoherently about his rights and false accusations. 2 local officers were standing over him. I went straight for the cabin. The back door was splintered, a jagged mess where he'd clearly tried to pry it open. I found Tyler and Ryan inside, both shaken but physically unharmed. Ryan's chest was heaving. He was screaming, "Liam, that Tyler ruined his life, that we all conspired against him." He was going to make sure Tyler paid for what he'd done. Tyler sat on the couch, arms wrapped tightly around his knees, his eyes wide with a residual terror that chilled me to the bone. I heard him say he was going to kill us all. Tyler whispered, "Then you." Then himself. He said if he couldn't have his life back, no one would have anything. The responding officer, Sergeant Williams, a different Sergeant Williams, this one local, approached me. "Captain Kane, we've got him on breaking and entering, attempted burglary, stalking, and violation of the restraining order. The district attorney is going to want to add terroristic threats based on what the kid heard." "The GPS data?" I asked, the single thought dominating my mind. "Already pulled it." The sergeant confirmed. "He's been circling this area for 6 hours. There are 12 cabins in this area. He must have been checking them one by one. 6 hours of stalking. 6 hours of premeditated violence. This wasn't a desperate mistake. This was a planned assassination attempt. That time signature would look absolutely damning in court. Has he lawyered up yet?" "His attorney's on the way. James Porter." I grimaced. Porter was expensive and ruthless. "This case is airtight," I said, my voice hardening into an absolute command. "Make sure every procedure is documented, every statement recorded, every piece of evidence photographed and logged." Porter is going to look for any mistake, any oversight, anything he can use. Give him nothing. Victor Harrison, lying in handcuffs on the cold dirt, had tried to reclaim his power by escalating to violence. Instead, he had just guaranteed his own conviction. I looked at Tyler, pulled him close, and felt the familiar tightness of my own emotional armor finally give way to the primal relief of a father who had almost lost his child. The captain was still in charge, but the man underneath was just overwhelmingly, gratefully, a dad. The physical confrontation was over, but the ultimate reckoning began in the sterile silence of the courtroom. Victor's second arraignment the morning after the cabin incident was a spectacle. His lawyer, James Porter, argued vehemently for bail, claiming his client was under extreme emotional distress, that the initial assault charges were false, and that Victor posed no real threat to anyone. Assistant District Attorney Rachel Morrison countered with the facts, laid out with clinical precision. She presented the GPS data showing us 6 hours of stalking outside Ryan's cabin, Tyler's consistent statement about the death threats, and the physical evidence of the attempted forced entry. Judge Patricia Martinez wasn't buying Porter's performance. She looked down at Victor, who sat there, pale and stunned, stripped of his usual arrogance. Mr. Harrison, you were out on bail with explicit conditions, including GPS monitoring and a restraining order. You violated both by tracking down your stepson to a remote location, attempting to break into the residence, and making threats against multiple individuals, including a minor child and a police captain. Bail is denied. You'll remain in custody pending trial. Victor's face went purple with outrage.
This is insane! I have rights!
I'm being persecuted. You have the right to remain silent until your trial, Judge Martinez said coldly. I suggest you exercise it. As they led Victor out, he locked eyes with me. The hatred there was pure and undiluted, a terrifying promise of future vengeance. But in that moment I felt not fear but cold, hard vindication. He had guaranteed his own downfall. The trial took 4 months to start. Porter used every delay tactic in the book, trying to suppress the evidence, but Judge Martinez denied them all. When we finally got to court, the case was even stronger than I had anticipated, a towering wall of evidence built by Stevens and Morrison. The prosecution called 14 witnesses over 6 days. Dr. Wong testified first, detailing the medical evidence, the bruising patterns, the force calculations, the timeline that directly contradicted Victor's version of events. She explained how the finger marks on Tyler's arms were classic indicators of superior adult strength being used against a child. Ryan testified about the terrifying night at the cabin, describing the fear, the crowbar, and the 6 hours of stalking. He was steady, credible, and focused. But the most damning moment came on the third day, when the prosecution played the S911 call from the cabin. Ryan's voice was urgent, describing Victor trying to break in. Then, faint in the background, but unmistakable on the cleaned-up audio, was Victor shouting, "I'm going to kill all of you. You destroyed my life. Tyler, you're dead, you hear me? Dead. And then your cop father." The sound filled the courtroom, silencing Porter's smug defense. Several jurors looked visibly shaken. This was no longer a misunderstanding or a simple assault. It was a clear demonstration of intent to murder. Tyler testified on day 4. He was nervous, dressed in a borrowed shirt and tie. Looking younger than his 16 years, but he was solid. I sat in the back of the courtroom, watching my son face down the man who had hurt him. Every fiber of my being screamed to intervene, to protect him, but I realized then that Tyler didn't need my physical armor anymore. He needed to tell his truth. Assistant Dia Morrison walked him through the events methodically. "Did you attack your stepfather that morning?" "No, ma'am. He grabbed me first and shoved me against the wall. I pushed him away once to create distance so I could get out of the hallway. That's all." Porter tried to shake him on cross-examination, implying I had coached him, suggesting his injuries were from football practice. "Convenient that you went straight to your uncle's garage where your father could be called to see your injuries." Porter sneered. "It's not convenient, sir," Tyler replied, his voice calm. "It's where I felt safe." The young man was unshakable, consistent and honest. He didn't break, he didn't embellish, and he didn't give Porter anything to work with. Then came Sarah's testimony. This surprised everyone, including me. Lauren had spent weeks talking her out of her denial, forcing her to see the reality of the man she had married. When Sarah took the stand, her voice broke immediately, but she held steady. "Did you see any signs of abuse before the incident with Tyler?" Morrison asked. "Not physical abuse," Sarah whispered. "But Victor had a temper. He'd snap at Tyler over small things. He'd make comments about Tyler being disrespectful or spoiled. I thought it was just adjustment issues. I was wrong. Do you believe your son's account of what happened?" Sarah looked toward Tyler, tears streaming down her face. "Yes, I believe Tyler, and I'm ashamed I didn't protect him better." That moment, the mother finally confirming her son's truth in public, was the final emotional beat, securing the victory. The jury returned the verdict after 8 hours of deliberation. Us guilty on all counts: assault on a minor, domestic violence, stalking, attempted burglary, making terroristic threats, and violation of a restraining order. The word hung in the air, cold, absolute, and sweet, The victory was complete. I had channeled my furious parental instinct into the meticulous process of the law, and the law had delivered. The word guilty was an echo of justice, but it was only the end of the war, not the end of the rebuilding. Sentencing came 2 weeks later. Judge Martinez listened to impact statements from Tyler, from Sarah, and from me. I spoke not as Captain Kane, but as Liam, the father who had almost lost his son to a man whose only goal was dominance. I spoke about the fear Tyler had carried, the professional instinct Victor had exploited, and the absolute necessity of ensuring men like him could never hold power over the vulnerable again. Judge Martinez then handed down her decision. She looked directly at Victor, who was now truly broken, stripped of his expensive suit and his professional facade. Mr. Harrison, you systematically abused a minor child in your care, then attempted to manipulate the legal system to avoid consequences. When that failed, you tracked down your victim to a remote location with the intent to harm him and others. You have shown no remorse, no understanding of the severity of your actions. She paused, letting the silence hang heavy in the courtroom. I am sentencing you to 25 years in state prison. No possibility of parole before 18 years. Victor's face collapsed. He began shouting again, claiming persecution. But the bailiffs quickly moved in and led him away. 25 years. By the time Victor Harrison got out, if he survived prison that long, he'd be 68 years old, irrelevant, and no threat to anyone in our family. The sense of vindication was immense, a deep cleansing release of the furious energy that had sustained me for months. 6 months after the trial, the physical evidence of the violence had faded completely. Tyler's bruises were gone, replaced by the healthy color of a teenager who was thriving. He made varsity football, started dating a girl from his chemistry class, and began talking about colleges 2 states away. The nightmares came less frequently. The fear in his eyes, the terror I'd seen in the cabin, was gone, replaced by the familiar spark of teenage confidence. The quiet, withdrawn boy I had encountered in Ryan's garage had found his voice and his footing again. The relationship with Sarah was a slow, deliberate reconstruction. She moved into an apartment 2 blocks from mine, a small place compared to Victor's mansion, but it was safe. She and Tyler were rebuilding their trust slowly, with honest conversations and the acceptance that trust, once broken, takes years to repair. She had apologized, not just for her denial of Victor's actions, but for the bitterness she had held against me for being an absent father. I, in turn, acknowledged the profound damage my relentless career had done to our family structure. We were learning to communicate not as ex-spouses, but as co-parents united by a shared purpose. She was trying. That was enough. My own arc, the one that started with me donning my uniform as armor, also began to shift. The intense, methodical hyper-vigilance didn't vanish overnight, but I consciously started putting down the shield. I put my uniform away every Friday evening, not to be taken out until Monday morning. I prioritized the weekends with Tyler, spending hours at Ryan's garage, working on cars and talking, not as captain to witness, but as dad to son. I learned to confront the guilt of my past and understand that my strength wasn't just in my authority, but in my ability to be vulnerable and present. The memory of Victor's hate-filled stare and the sound of Tyler's terrified whisper from the cabin would never fully leave me. But the lasting truth, the only truth that mattered, was that when the lines were crossed, when the primal duty of protection was activated, I had used everything I had, my fury, my intellect, and my command of the law, to win. I hadn't just secured a conviction, I had secured my son's future, and in doing so, had finally become the father he truly needed.